guys, it's Kaylee from the Mini Homestead. Today I am finally getting a chance to make my soil block recipe. We finally have a day that is not too cold, it is not raining, and the wind is pretty subtle. So I am hoping that I will get this done today while my kiddos are napping. This recipe is not my original recipe. I actually got it from the Seasonal Homestead, who got it from the book by Eliot Coleman called The Organic Gardener. I did purchase the book just to read a little bit more extensively into soil blocking since this is my first time doing it, and I have to say it is a really good resource, especially if this is something that you are trying to look into. He talks very well about when soil blocking kind of started, why you would want to do it, and how it can be beneficial to your plants, and I found that very helpful. So I will link both the recipe and the book down below for you if that is something you are interested in. But like I said, my kids are napping right now, so I'm going to use this time and get my soil block recipe ready and all mixed together. So to get started on this project, I am using a tarp to mix everything on top of. I saw the Seasonal Homestead do this as well, and I thought this was a really smart idea because I've seen some people use wheelbarrows, which is totally fine. But for me, I thought that the way to get the most out of all of the soil was to use a tarp. And what I mean by that is when it comes to storing all of this and putting it in my totes, I'm able to pour every last bit of soil that I mix up into those totes. And I feel like I'm not going to be leaving anything behind like I might in a wheelbarrow. The first ingredient you will need for this soil block recipe is peat moss. I was lucky enough to find this at our hardware store. And then at another hardware store, they had these very handy 2-gallon buckets. So it made it nice and easy to measure out those 8 gallons that I needed. Now the Seasonal Homestead recommends sifting through your peat moss to get out any large pieces that might be in it. I don't remember the Eliot Coleman book saying so, but it is a good idea just in case you have those larger pieces in it. But I noticed as I was filling this bucket up that this peat moss actually had very small particles, so I didn't feel the need to have to make any type of homemade sifter to do that. But the reason why you don't want larger pieces in this is because when you go to make those soil blocks, you want it to be compact enough that it stays together, and larger pieces will hinder that. The next ingredient you want to add in is the lime. I'm using a 1/2 cup, but it's important that you do the lime right after the peat moss because according to Eliot Coleman, these are the most acidic ingredients within the mixture, so you want to do one right after the other. But once you've added in that lime, make sure that you just mix it up really well in the pile and get all the way around to make sure everything is mixed well together. After adding in the lime, I am adding in 5 gallons of perlite. According to Coleman's book, you can use a coarse sand or perlite in this step. Either or will add air to the mixture, but I thought since it was 5 gallons, the perlite might make the mixture a little bit more lightweight, so that's why I went ahead and stuck with what the Seasonal Homestead had in her recipe. Now, Coleman does mention at this point in his book that the reason why you may not want to use a commercial mix is because they add vermiculite, which can be a little bit too light and can actually get crushed in the soil block making process. But once you've added in that perlite, just make sure you're getting all around in that peat moss and really mixing everything well together. After adding in that perlite, it's time to add in the base fertilizer. So according to Coleman, you'll want to use a mixture of blood meal, a type of colloidal phosphate, and green sand. So again, I was sticking with what the Seasonal Homestead had in her recipe, and I used a cup of blood meal, a cup of green sand, and a 1/2 cup of bone meal. And that bone meal will act as the colloidal phosphate for me. Now, if I would have thought about this sooner, I definitely would have taken these finer ingredients and mixed them in a bucket beforehand, just to make sure that they were all mixed well together and then added them to the pile. But in all honesty, this should be just fine. Then, as you can tell, I want to make sure that I'm working that entire pile and getting everything mixed well together. So again, just make sure when you're doing this that you get down in there, get your hands dirty, and really make sure all those ingredients are getting mixed very well. Finally, after you've added in that base fertilizer, it is time for the final ingredient, which is 8 gallons of compost. Now, we don't have any compost on hand currently, so I was able to purchase some good compost from my local hardware store. Usually I would purchase it from our nursery, but they don't have any at the very moment, so this is the next best option. Now, this is an ingredient that you may want that homemade sifter for, but I didn't have any issues with any large particles as I was working with this. My only problem was that the soil itself was kind of chunky, so I just needed to take my hands through and just break up those chunks as I was filling the bucket. Then, as you can tell, this pile has gotten very big, so I was making sure that I was working around the pile and getting everything mixed up to the best of my abilities. And then also, if I came across any larger chunks, that I was breaking those apart as well, because come soil block making time, I don't want any of those big chunks in my way as I'm using that soil block making tool. So again, just make sure you're really working in that pile and getting everything mixed up the best that you possibly can. Alright, so this is what it looks like all mixed up and ready to go. I'm super excited to start using this. I am going to store it in these tubs for the time being. And according to that book, the longer you let this sit, the better it can actually be for the soil, because it gives everything that you mixed in there a chance to kind of marinate, if you will. This will only be in here for about a couple weeks, but like I said, that book says that you can definitely let it sit. He has even let it sit for up to 3 months and it's done perfectly fine, but you can also mix it as you need it. Okay, there we go. If you guys have any questions, please let me know in the comments below. And like I said, I will link both the recipe and that book for you guys in case you are interested in either one of those resources. But other than that, I will see you guys next time. Bye.